Mr Speaker, the objective of the EPA in the Environmental Protection Authority Act is in section 12, and subsection 1 says, and I quote, "The objective of the EPA is to undertake its functions in a way that A, contributes to the efficient, effective and transparent management of New Zealand's environment and natural and physical resources, and B, enables New Zealand to meet its international obligations," unquote. This bill would add a new clause C to subsection 1 of section 12 by adding the words, quote, "protects, maintains and enhances New Zealand's environment," unquote. But subsection 2 is also relevant, Mr Speaker, and it says, quote, "when undertaking its particular functions under an environmental act, the EPA must also act in a way that furthers any objectives or purposes stated in respect of that act," unquote. So the EPA must further the objectives under any environmental act. Or to put it in another way, the objectives of the EPA Act are the objectives stated in, quote, "an environmental act." So then you have to look at those acts to see what the objectives are. So the problem is there is no definition in the EPA Act of the words "an environmental act." Does it mean the Environment Act itself? You would think it would, because it is the Environment Act, and yet that Act has no specifically stated objectives at all. Isn't that strange? So we have this legislation, the EPA Act, which tells us to refer to legislation like the Environment Act, and yet that has no stated environmental purposes or objectives. Does it mean the Resource Management Act? You would expect that it would, and if so, then contrary to the Environment Act, it has very comprehensively stated objectives, and they are, and I quote section 5.1, "The purpose of this Act is to promote the sustainable management of natural and physical resources," and quote 2, "In this Act, sustainable management means managing the use, development and protection of natural and physical resources in a way or at a rate which enables people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being and for their health and safety, while A, sustaining the potential of natural and physical resources, excluding minerals, to meet the reasonably foreseeable needs of future generations, and B, safeguarding the life-supporting capacity of air, water, soil and ecosystems, and C, avoiding, remedying or mitigating any adverse effects of activities on the environment," unquote. So contrary to the Environment Act, the Resource Management Act has a very comprehensive statement of purpose. So the purposes of the Environmental Protection Act are those in other environmental pieces of legislation, only some of which, however, do have comprehensive statements of objectives, and some, like the Environment Act itself, have none at all. So that's a problem, I believe, with the Environmental Protection Act. So in order to determine whether the EPA Act has any adequately expressed objectives at all depends on whether the environmental acts have any adequately expressed environmental objectives. And it also depends, of course, on the interpretation of the words, quote, "an environmental act" in subsection 2 of section 12. There is no definition in the Act of those words. The most important act for it to apply to, I believe, is the the RMA Act 1986, but it has stated objectives, whereas the Environment Act itself has none. So what we see, therefore, is that the EPA Act has sloppy drafting when it comes to finding out what its objectives are. You have to refer to other legislation, some of which has environmental statements, objective statements, and some of which do not. Mr Speaker, for that reason alone, this bill is necessary to go to a select committee to sort that out, to sort out how the objectives of the EPA Act should be properly expressed in that Act and not expressed by reference to other pieces of legislation. So the point here is that there is an issue to be fixed, and I'm surprised that the government members opposite don't even seem to advert to any of this, and it's time they did. New Zealand First will support the bill to go to the Select Committee for that purpose alone.
Mr. Speaker.
Matt Ducey.
Thank you,